Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, February 5th. I cannot believe it is February already. And Shyamala, you're dealing with snow still.
I am.
Yeah. So for those of you who have not joined us before, this is Shyamala Prayaga. She is Ford's head of conversational AI for their autonomous vehicle line. Welcome again, Shyamala. This is really her show. I'm just moderating it for her. And good morning. I don't know how to pronounce this name. Nishta?
Nishta.
I did well. Good morning, Nishta. And I am Lee Andrews. I'm with Akatame, and we have another person on here. Good morning. Happy Friday. Whoever that is, LinkedIn user, because your name isn't popping up. I'm Lee Andrews, and I am part of Akathame's team that focuses on the talent experience from attraction all the way through their entire career in your organization or their organization, their own careers. So I also partner with Shyamala. In full disclosure, Shyamala has a school, has what do we want to? It's more a cohort, right? It's more of a cohort where people are learning about voice design, specifically in voice conversational design, because there's not enough people doing that particular job. Last night, good morning. I got to put my glasses on now. Shaniqua. Hello, Shaniqua. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So this is an open forum. You can ask Shyamala any questions that you'd like. Typically, Shyamala is the subject matter expert in the voice area in anything to do with ramping up your career, transitioning from a current career to a new career in voice. She's also that technical expert in voice, and I am the talent agent. I'm the one who helps navigate people in this place, in this space for career support. So we've got some questions already. Shyamala, we had an interesting conversation with Brett Kinsella this week on Clubhouse, and I do want you to share what you learned from that conversation. A, because it was over my head, and I know that you can bring it down to my level. And B, I think that it's something that will make those who are interested in this profession, they will want to know what it is that we learned. So what's our first question from Nishta? What would be the right personality types for a career like this? And let's see, the other one is, does anyone have to have any prior connection to voice tech or UX to venture into this field as someone like me who's transitioning from humanities? Yeah, let's start with that. Alexa, why is Lee off? Oh my God, whoever this person is.
I love that.
Thank you so much. But whoever this person is who is, going only by LinkedIn user, I like white roses. And so it's Friday morning, people. All right, let's go. Let's answer the first question. Nisha wants to know about transitioning from the humanities into voice. What are your thoughts on that?
So you don't need to have any kind of prior connection with UX or voice tech if you want to get into the space. There are many people. So one of the person, who's part of our training is a sound designer, comes from no background whatsoever about UX or about design or linguistics in general, which is again a very common field through which people get into the space. So the simple answer is you don't need to have any prior connection to get any of those experiences. But coming from any of these fields like UX or coming from linguistics background definitely helps you, because there are parts and parcels of voice interaction in general which requires linguistics, which require a little bit of psychology, which requires the UX mindset, the design process kind of things. And being able to learn those things is definitely going to help.
So that's interesting that you say that, because this my secret admirer over here, his name is Alex Solis. He is a leader in learning and development. He had up Dell's learning and development. He went out on his own. I'm so glad that you're joining this morning, Alex. Good morning. Really and truly, the question that I have for him is, how is voice changing learning and development, right? So, boy, if you were online right now, I could bump you into the into the room. I don't even know how to do that. But Shamala, how is voice changing learning and development?
So, quite a few things. See, basically anything which is a search-based interaction, right? Is So, for example, if you have to go and search for what course is good for me, or like Nishta just mentioned, like, do I have to have any prior voice connection or any such things before I start any training or before I get into the field? So that's exactly the point. If there was some sort of voice interaction through which we can, simplify the interaction for the user to make them understand and learn, that will be amazing. So, what courses are good for me? If the assistant was able to tell, like, hey, based on your experience, these courses seems relevant or something like that. So those are just basic things, but also to the extent where what kind of certifications I have done, what has been my track record, and how is my career progressing, and those kind of things will also be so beneficial for any individual. So there's a lot which can be done in learning and development in general with voice or chatbots.
So let's why I'm thinking about that, particularly for learning and development. I'm also thinking that if these interactive, because some of the classes that Alex creates are animations, right? It's like a gaming environment. And so I'm wondering if and how voice will interact in those kinds of learning environments with those modules. And it's no longer, the fingers and the keyboards, and it's all, I choose A, I choose B.
Yeah, so there is this person called Julie Daniel Davis. If you have not heard about her, I would definitely recommend anyone to talk to her. She's amazing. She runs a podcast called Voice in Education, and
Uh-huh.
she just focuses on all these different use cases about how we can empower and enable people to use voice technology in the education segment. To your point, Lee, that for quizzes and for just the basic kind of interactions in the school, to even in public schools here, sending any kind of announcements or creating flash briefings for parents so that they don't miss any opportunity to learn or get information which otherwise may be missed if they miss the newsletters and things like that. So there's a lot going on in this field. There's not a lot of traction, there's just the momentum and talks at this moment, but there are some folks who have done some work, and Julie has done some work in her own field because she's an educator by career, and she does a lot of these things where she's trying to create some Alexa skills and test them out and stuff like that. So there's a lot of opportunity. This whole demand of voice in education will boom.
Boy, the opportunities are pretty much endless. And there's another person. Do you know this person? You may also want to
Ira
interview.
Roldan. Yeah.
You know her?
Yeah, she's great. So yeah.
Melody. Very cool. Very cool. So Nishta had another question here. Let's see if I can go back to it. Nishta. And what would be the right personality to? Now that's interesting. Personality types for a career like that. For a career,
That's an interesting question. So, if you like problem solving, if you like, solving any kind of complex interactions into simple one, and if you think you have your right brain and left brain both works, you know, in a proper conjunction, then I would say that that is the kind of personality. Because see, people who are creative, they have a certain kind of mindset, and people who are engineering driven, they have a certain kind of mindset. This is a field which requires a perfect blend. When I say engineering, it's not that you have to code, but you need to know the nuts and bolts of how to design conversations. You need to know how to design the interactions. Like we kept talking about this, Lee, in our previous live chats, right? There's so much which goes into voice interaction, the kind of the technology itself and all, right? But if you think you are creative, you are a problem solver, definitely, this is a great space to be in for multiple reasons. First of all, every person speaks differently. The way you speak, the way I speak, we have different dialects, we have different things. For some, English is a first language, for some it is a second language, and they have to translate and they have to speak. So sometimes, you will see all these different kind of variations in how people speak. But to the extent that the psychology plays an important role in conversation design. So let's take for example, you want to order pizza, right? And you may give me a lot of information, and you can say, I want a medium pizza with jalapenos as a topping, and no cheese or whatever. You can give me a lot of information at once, or you can say, like, I want to eat pizza. That's it. Now, how as a designer would you think about these two scenarios and then design your solution? Like, well, you've given me so much information, how do I dissect it and make sure the conversation flows in the right direction? Or to the other point where you have given me very less information, I have to now pull in that information from you. So how do I do that? How I ask you that, okay, what kind of pizza would you like, for how many people, and what kind of toppings do you want? Do you want any sides with it, and any such things, right? So you really need to be able to lay out the conversation in order to do that. But then there are sometimes situations where you want to confirm the order, right? So you have to then decide whether you want to ask for implicit confirmations or explicit confirmations. How do you want to go about those things? Sometimes the assistant would have issues understanding what the user said, or there will be misrecognition or disambiguations. These are all technical terms, I understand. But then let's take for example, you said peppers and it understood something else, and now you want to confirm. How do you want to design the solution so that it doesn't seem or sound dumb? So will you ask, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I did not get it. Or will you say something like, was it jalapenos, just to sound a little bit smarter and confident? So you really need to think about all of these kind of things when you're designing. And this is not for one use case. When you're designing an entire assistant, there are so many different use cases where you'll have to think about such things. But then you also have to think about the overall interactions, like how do you decide to engage with the users? Do you say, how can I help you? So for example, when we were designing our voice assistants in the car, it always used to say, please say a command all the time. And then, well, what if I'm a new user and I don't know how to say or how to initiate or ask, because voice commands are open, right, sometimes. So that's difficult. So how do you then decide to make it more user friendly? And then let's say you mentioned that, hey, I'm your bot, I can do blah blah blah, how can I help you today, right? Then all the three four things the bot is able to do. But then what happens if there is a returning user who knows what the technology is capable of doing, and if you keep repeating those things again, it may sound dumb for it. So there's a lot of balancing and a lot of thought process which goes into designing an interaction for the bot. So you need to have that creative mindset. But at the same time, the engineering mindset is also important, like I mentioned, for some of the very reasons, like, well, what happens if error happens? How do you do the error recoveries and stuffs like that?
I think this goes what you're telling me would put me in a fetal position in minutes if I had to go that far down. I mean, just thinking about how the human interacts and how the human speaks, right? And you're saying you have to take all of that into consideration across multiple languages, multiple personalities, multiple products, multiple engagements. I mean, this is not just a creative and engineering person. This is a person who has the ability to go so far down a rabbit hole to constantly be curious and ask, what if? Right? That what if question never ends. So you need somebody who's highly curious and what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like a researcher, like a scientist, right? That mind is always researching and sifting and asking that why and what if. So we do have another question here. Shyamala, do you cover natural language processing and it's Python, and is Python the leading language for VUIs? Does everybody know what VUIs here? Because we've got some people who are brand new to voice. So Shyamala, why don't you first explain what a VUI is and what's the difference between natural language processing and something else?
Yeah. So VUIs are voice user interface. So as a designer, when whatever you are designing the conversational flows right from the beginning, whatever I just mentioned, right, when you are thinking about all of those things, you are designing the voice user interface. Because the modality is voice, we call it voice user interface. Like GUI is graphical user interface, where you are designing interactions for your visuals and mobile apps and websites and things like that. So the VUI has two parts to it. One is the design part and one is the development part. So design part is where people like me or designers would be thinking about all of the things, the interactions in the first place, writing the sample dialogues and all. And then the second part to it is where the interaction is developed using a conversational AI platform. So there are two parts to this, and sometimes, I do write the conversational design part of it, like designing the flows and all of those things. But the backend system is where the engineering will come into play. Now, where does natural language fit into all of these things? So, when the user said something, or there are multiple ways to say something, right? I want to eat pizza, or I'm feeling hungry, or maybe you want to say something else. Weather is a very good example to say, like, do I need an umbrella? Will it rain? Or all of these things, right? Because there could be different ways you can ask for the same thing. So people can ask anything in any way, and natural language is where you have to feed in that information. Now, there are two parts to natural language. One is the engine itself, and that is where Alex, Python is required, right? Because you need to create that engine for the natural language system, so that you are able to slice and dice or understand the patterns and all. That is not what VUI designers deal with. That is something completely different. That is dealt with engineers and other folks. That is an engine by itself. But there is a small subsection of natural language, which is natural language understanding, which designers deal with in the conversational flow, where they are thinking about different ways the user would say something, the different utterances, and then mapping it into the intents and conversational flows, which requires no coding whatsoever. And that is what my course covers. If someone is interested, and natural language processing is huge, natural language understanding is a small part of it, which voice interaction design uses or voice application uses. So my course does not cover the natural language processing or any of the Python related things, but my course does cover the natural language understanding and how to create the intents or how to map the language model and things like that.
And so, Alex, are you asking because you want to bring that to the program? One never knows. Let's see. There was another comment that he made because we were talking about the type of people that would be successful in this place. He said that's the thing about creating interfaces, that you have to think systematically and connect all the dots during and after the interaction. What does he mean by after the interaction?
I love that. I love that. Yeah, after the interaction is so important. And in conversation design and voice interaction design, it is much more important. When you design a website or a web application or a mobile application, your job is done, right? After that, you will look through analytics, and then maybe you start planning your next features and all, but you don't have to constantly go back and improve your website, like, oh, you know what, this button is not working. So there's a different kind of thought process and design process when it comes to designing web applications or mobile applications. But with voice, it's ongoing process. It is never ending. So let's say you had let's say you were designing the weather bot, and you had couple of intents and utterances. So you are supporting out of the box, what is the weather, or do I need a raincoat, will it rain, and maybe something else, and you added your language model. But after that has launched, now you realize, like, there was one more utterance, maybe, is it going to rain today? But I did not add that in the language model or the utterances. So the system throws error all the time. And it is like, I'm sorry, I did not get that, right? Now, you don't want that to happen. So you're looking at that data, coming back, and then improving on it, constantly adding the language and utterances, the new utterances which you identified where there was a failure. But at the same time, you're also looking at the different kind of, performance of the voice assistant, like how long the session lasted, at what point did the voice assistant break, or was the session successful or did it fail? If it was successful, how long did it take? And all of those kind of things. Or were there any users who abandoned the voice session in a certain point? So now you have to again go back and wear your engineering hat and the curious hat, and then look at, okay, what's happening here? Is it and there may be sometimes multiple features which you are supporting, and maybe the user has not used them. So you go back and look at all of those things and you're like, okay, why is this feature not being used? What is happening? Is it because of the discoverability issue, or is it because of usability issue? And now you try to focus on understanding those and fixing those. So there's a lot of things which goes even after you have created an application or voice interface, because this is an ongoing process, a constant improvement which you have to do.
So so you're talking about the failures. As these interactions fail, how are they being reported and flagged for designers and engineers?
There's something called voice analytics. So voice analytics is basically any, like, if you know what analytics is, there are different ways you can analyze things, right? And you get some sort of report around the entire interactions. The same way we get voice analytics of each of the things. We can create whatever analytics we want. There are a lot of great tools out there in house. Also, many companies create their own analytics to understand what kind of utterance was used and how long the session lasted, all of those. Any kind of failures, any kind of success, any kind of things, everything is part of that, and you are able to slice and dice the data and see like what's happening. And that is what will be used by the quality team, the engineering team, the UX team, and the a design team to go over and look at, and okay, now let's look at how do we want to improve, what is our plan, what should be focusing on. So it's a constant like teamwork which has to keep going on, and the analytics data definitely helps.
So what I'm also hearing is that if you're going into this field as a professional, you have to be collaborative and you have to be able to work with every level
stakeholders.
of stakeholders. Yeah.
Yes.
This
is not one man's job. This is something which definitely needs a lot of collaboration. So if you like collaboration, you will enjoy this job.
Yeah. If you're a solo act, this is not the place for you. So I see the power of VUIs to use a backend with supervised and unsupervised machine learning. This would allow L&D to recognize future patterns of effectiveness and avoid possible failures. Help me understand what that actually means in terms of are you preventing? So, I always think of Boeing. I have to think of that plane, because that instruction, whatever training those folks got, it didn't work. Either the technology didn't work or the training didn't work. And I have not dug in to find out if it was one or the other or both. So if we're talking about adding another layer of interaction during the learning process, it recognizes that failure sooner rather than later.
Yeah. So, okay. So there are a couple of things. This is a great question, actually. And I like, Alex, that you bring up supervised and unsupervised machine learning. So this is what happens when you are designing an artificially intelligent solution, right? There are two ways to train the system or train the model. One is supervised, one is unsupervised. So supervised learning is, let's take autonomous as an example. Now, we want the autonomous car to be able to effectively run on the roads. But in order to do those things, there is one thing which you have to do. Maybe in the initial phases, or maybe, part of the phase is you have to bring in some objects and make the system identify, like, this is a human, this is a trash can, this is a tree, this is the road, this is the traffic signal. How do you do that? There's a lot of training data which will go into just bringing that and then training the machine learning model. And so that kind of model where you have the data you are bringing and you are training the system is more of supervised. But what is unsupervised is what we are doing right now, where we know a little bit of pattern, but we constantly run our test vehicles on the roads. So the moment it identifies some things, it starts learning about it more and more, and it becomes more confident, like this is a human and this is a trash can. So I can differentiate between these two people now, although like there may be the shape or form could be pretty much similar. So that's the kind of things which happens in AI, which is like very complex. You need to have different training models. Now with this kind of thing, and I love this, like I see the power of VUIs to use the backend with supervised and unsupervised. Now let's say uh, the learning and development also has a machine learning. So if you go to LinkedIn Learning, if you go to Coursera or Udemy, based on what courses you have taken in the past, it tells you what courses you should be taking, or it recommends you what kind of courses you should be taking, and things like that, right? So part of it is supervised, part of it is unsupervised. So that is where, if based on whatever the user has said, whatever analytics was identified, like what kind of courses they've been asking for and things like that, we can use those things in the learning and development to identify the patterns and provide more optimized responses and experiences for the people.
Okay. And Alex, we love the nerds here. We welcome and love nerds. He also made a comment of humans may not respect red lights. Careful.
Machines will.
Machines will respect red lights. And what does he mean? What does he mean by this? Because I know that I used to not respect red lights, but I've changed my ways as I've gotten older. So what does he mean by that when it comes to L&D? Yeah, like, okay. Oh, well, there we have it.
Perfect.
So if you guys don't know, this is Alex's program. It's very similar. So I've taken one of his courses and plan to take many more in the e-learning launch section. But I think that this voice and learning is just in the beginning stages. Is that right? Or is this something that has been around for a while?
Voice has been there for a while, in different forms and shapes. If you look at the history, it has been there from the early 1960s, I guess. That's what I remember. IVR systems, they are also voice applications or VUIs. It's a different kind of interface. Every time you call a customer care agent, and you would see press 1 for this, press 2 for this, and all of those. Look at you. That's the frustration people have, but those systems have existed forever, and those are a variant of voice user interface, because that is where the user interaction is happening. Well, Alexa and Google Assistant is another variant, and it's a different level of voice interactions, where you are actually using it for concierge or communication or entertainment and things like that. But IVRs have existed long time back, just because it helps the users in many ways. So I would say, like, it just keeps improving day by day, as we start to bring more people and as we start to think about the right kind of interactions and all. But yeah, this field and voice technology is not something which is new. Like, voice dictations were tried many years back. If you look at the entire history of voice in general and the evolution, you will see, like, we've been trying this for many years.
So what you're saying is that the evolution, we're in the pivoting part of that voice evolution.
We are, yeah.
And if so, we're taking it to that next step. And so I did get pinged. Somebody wants to know if Vicky is actually could be a reality, and I asked what Vicky was, because it wasn't ringing a bell. She said from the movie I, Robot. So that's a conversation we can have another day, because that kind of terrifies me. And let's see, we've got one last comment here. Shyamala, thanks for your insights. Before I go, please explain some of the challenges of implementing VUI. There needs to be a training period, right? Currently, that requires patience from the users of.
So, okay. So challenges of implementing VUI, I wouldn't say, that requires a training period. Nowadays, the conversational platforms which we have are able to train the systems and models on the go. which is really nice. The challenges I would say is when you are designing the conversation, no matter how many type of users you think about, how many personas you create, it is easy to miss some of the basic interactions, and that is where some of the analytics comes into play. It constantly keeps helping you. The other challenge for implementing VUI is, it's all at the mercy of the technology you're using. As a designer, you may want to design great solution, and you would be like, this is my moonshot. I want to have something like, an assistant which understands me, which does everything for me, and I can just speak to her and all. But if your technology is not supporting, or if your system is not supporting, if your vehicle architecture is not supporting, and any of these kind of things, you are not able to implement. So it's not exactly the challenges the VUI has, but it's like all the other underlying and supporting features which brings those challenges to the VUI. Because voice user interface is just like you're creating your flows, you're creating your dialogues, you're creating your entire language model. So another thing I would say is utterances. You have to know all the different ways the user can say something. Well, sometimes it is great. Sometimes you have to think about, oh, wow, yeah, accent is always an issue. That is something which has to be tackled by the speech recognition system, but not the VUI, which is a separate engine. Like if your speech recognition system does not understand accents or does not understand languages, those will be a problem. But when you're designing the voice user interface, your core focus is interactions. Like when you're designing GUIs, you're thinking about interaction design. Where do I show the button? When you click on the button, what do we show? And all of those kind of things. At that point, you're not thinking like .NET is not able to do this, or PHP is not able to do this, or how will I connect to the backend system? What's happening, right? But those things are so important because you may have designed an interaction which is great, but if your backend system is not able to give you that information, well, it will not work. So those are all the kind of things which is required. I love it, Alex.
Pamela, I'm not sure if you know Alex, but I will make sure that you two are connected online in LinkedIn, because I think you guys could do some real good in the world combining your two brains and talent. So we are out of time. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us. This has been a great chat. Thank you, Alex. And I can't remember her name now.
Nishta,
thank you so much. And for all of you who joined, and Shaniqua, I think that's Shanique. I'm not sure. But thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you next Friday right here, 8 o'clock. Bye-bye.
thank you so much.